Welcome to another Complete Developer Live with your hosts, Beard Man and the Boy Wonder. This evening, we are drinking more Kirkland's. We both have a brown ale. Now,
because it came in a big old box.
It did. Now, we tried starting this earlier this evening, and, we ran into some technical difficulties and some personality difficulties.
Yeah. So that's one of those things. People clash at different points. It's not a big deal. Beej and I can have some pretty irate arguments and pretty quickly be joking around again. So it's not really that big of a deal. We used to actually do martial arts together and spar. Mm-hmm. And that was a pretty good resolution. It's a little rough on the furnishings, so we don't do that here.
Yeah, we played Thumb War. We did.
I've got like lethal Nintendo thumb, man. I mean,
that's why I always win.
It's not good. All right, so
no, let's joking aside though, we had a disagreement. We talked it out, and we're good to go. So let's go Predators. Talking about disagreements, I disagree with any Winnipeg fans because they all think that we should lose tonight.
Yep, we're united on this one.
Yeah. So this has been a very exciting season and postseason for the Predators. I've been going to watch games with some of our friends, sitting at bars and watching the games. Been a lot of fun. Hoping that we go all the way, though. After Saturday, guys, I'm telling you, that was rough. I didn't even stay the whole, I left 5 minutes of the game. Well, with 5 minutes left in the game because I couldn't watch it. That was just too brutal. So we have to win tonight to stay in the running. So that's cool. I have been pranking my mom a little bit via Alexa. So, I recently started using the reminder skill to say stuff like, oh, hey, Alexa, remind me to do this or do that at this time. So I was showing it to my mom. I'm like, hey, check this out. She really likes the timer. So I'm like, hey, you can use this reminder.
And she's got an Alexa too, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah. And so it'll pop up on your phone too if you've got the Alexa app. It'll show you the reminder. So it's really convenient. So in the process, I was explaining this to my mom. So I said, Alexa, remind me to poop in an hour. So an hour goes by, and, we were doing something completely different. I was helping her out around the house, and all of a sudden Alexa just chimes in, reminder, poop.
And what Beej is not actually telling you here, which I suspect actually is what happened, is that he forgot that it wasn't his Alexa.
No, I didn't forget.
It wasn't really a prank. It just happened that way. He just needed the reminder, gentle reminder, and it got him an hour later.
No.
He said, "Oh, it was a prank. I meant to do that." Sure.
My mom got a little bit annoyed with it, but she laughed, and then she's like, "All right, this is kind of annoying." So I decided to sneak in a few more reminders throughout the week. So randomly throughout this week, my mother is going to get a reminder. Poop.
All right. Can you set repeating reminders on there? Because that sounds like that would be fun. Do it every 13 and a half hours. Where they go, well, it was 2 o'clock yesterday, but today it's 3:30.
I don't know. Now I've got to look into
that.
Now
you're going to look into it.
I'm really am. Because what I did was when, if I was working over near the Alexa, I'd just lean in and be like, Alexa, remind me to poop on June 22nd at 3 p.m.
Oh, Lord, you set them all the way into the summer.
Yes.
Oh, man.
And I don't even remember the dates that I put in there.
So you can't remove them very easily. They're just going to do it. Sometimes poop is a surprise. All right, so there's just really, that's kind of hard to follow up with my week. So I was in Vegas, went to MicroConf. It was good. MicroConf is a conference for people that are software developers that are trying to get a SaaS business going, get some kind of side thing going, and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of marketing stuff. This is the third year I've gone. Didn't get as much out of it this time as far as the actual talks, but I got more out of the hallway track, where people just stand around talking.
Yeah.
Because like when I was on the plane, I worked up a list of, what I wanted to talk to people about and who I wanted to talk to.
Well, didn't you get to hang out some with John Sonmez?
Yes, I talked to him quite a bit.
I'm a little bit jealous of that because I haven't actually gotten to physically meet him.
Yeah.
We've had him on the show.
We had, the steaks that we had. Sorry. I was over here. It's like, this looks correct, but it's not. The steaks we had, I swear those suckers were that big, and they were like that thick. It's the biggest.
Like the size of the roast I made.
It was huge. I couldn't eat the whole thing. I ordered it rare, and it was a little bit closer to blue rare in the middle. But
I like them.
it was still pretty good. It was just kind of cool.
Yeah. See.
So it was.
There's the roast that I made.
Yeah. So it was. It was a big honking steak and scotch.
Of course.
So that was basically it. So it was good. Yeah, like I said, I learned a lot. Came back with a whole lot of inspiration. Gosh, I don't know, 20-something items to talk to you about. A couple of them that have to be triaged tonight, or dealt with tonight. I always use that word wrong. A couple of them that have to be tossed out and handled, quickly. And the others, can be kind of stretched out. So got a lot of good stuff. I'll also tell you that United Airlines kind of irritated me on the way up there a little bit. The first leg of the trip was no big deal. The second leg of the trip was a bit of a problem. I got stuck between a dude that was well over 6 feet and looked like he probably lifted as part of his job. Just like, the dude was built, right? And so somebody like that, when they take the armrest, you're like, okay, I can either ask for the armrest and get put in the overhead compartment, or I can just deal. And on the other side, the other fellow was a bit large, not from exercising. And so I spent 3.5 hours with my elbows on my knees like this. Needless to say, like this shoulder is jacked up. I can get it up to about right here, and it starts hurting. And it's just like I can't push off of things with it. So it's really messed up.
When I'm on flights like that, what I like to do is
tell Alexa to remind you to poop.
Well, I do, but
if only they'd had an Alexa on and had their headphones in. Yeah. I could have totally.
You could have. Yeah. So what I do, and it's funny because I didn't do this on purpose the first time, but I have ever since. Is I had a book and I just kind of had been reading it, or it was my Kindle, and I'd been reading it. They said turn the electronics off, so I just folded it over, leaned back, closed my eyes, and fell asleep. Yeah. And I'm just like this.
I was in the seat over the wing.
Oh yeah,
the exit seat that you can't lean back.
Okay, well I mean, still no joke. I'm just gone, and the guy sitting next to me is an older gentleman. He's like, we land, and I kind of wake up, and I'm waking up, and he's like, you slept that entire flight without moving. He's like, I don't know how you did that because we ordered 3 drinks while you were asleep across you.
and you didn't get me one.
Yeah, I know.
Like that's the kind of stuff you wake up a stranger for. Hey, buddy. Yeah. Free drink. Hey. Come on, man. You're American. This is how we get where we don't fit in the seats, right? We get the free drinks. So we went completely off the rails. I'm sorry.
So in podcast network news, we have changed the topic of our panel for Music City Tech. While the idea is really great, it's going to make a wonderful episode. It may not draw the biggest audience at the conference. We discussed it with some of the conference organizers, and so we're going to talk about something that's a little bit more in line with some of the other talks that are going on there. The goal is that by getting several speakers to discuss it and discuss the topic, we'll be able to bring something new to the conversation that individually those speakers may not have on their own. So it's going to be fun. Really suggest you check that out. You can look it up at sessions.musiccitytech.com. Also, we are ordering new water bottles. So if you've sent us an email I should have responded to that email saying, hey, we're ordering some new water bottles. They're on their way. Normally when I get emails in, as soon as they come in, I start the process of sending that water bottle out to you. And when we went on back order, that meant going on to what was that? Cafe Press. Yeah, and ordering it and just having them send it. But because we've decided to order new water bottles, I kind of put that on hold. So if you haven't heard back from me, then send me another email just to neckbeards@CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. Just in case I missed it, I want to make sure that everyone who has won a water bottle actually receives the water bottle that they won.
Okay, so listener questions. So here's the first one. My coworker writes terrible, unmaintainable spaghetti code, but it works. How do I confront them about this? And I'll start out here by saying that confrontation may not be the best path forward on this situation. The first thing is don't make enemies when you don't need to. That's just bad tactics. Like, you'll get enough enemies in your life without creating them yourself. So don't bother doing that. The other thing is the person that did it they may not know a better way, and they may be willing to learn. So if you approach them correctly and somewhat carefully, you can actually have a better programmer on your team instead of screwing that up.
Right. You know, I had something similar happen not too long ago, and it wasn't actually about coding, but about some management styles and stuff. And the person I was talking to, I said, hey, you know, I've got some experience in this. If you want to get together next time we're in the office, we can go over it, and I can show you what I know about it. Now, I'll be honest, that was not my first instinct.
Your first instinct is, smack, this is stupid. What are you doing?
Yes, yeah. That was, and I rewrote that email about 3 times trying to think, all right, how can I get the best out of the situation?
Yeah, and pro tip, if you write an email like this, don't put the to line in. Or, like, don't mark anybody to send it. That way you don't accidentally send it, or, you know, like, you have to remember to go actually do that.
Or write it in a Word editor.
Yeah.
And then copy it over.
See, I leave the to off and put that in last, because sometimes you'll write the email to like 5 people, and you realize, hey, there's this one person like that this is going to offend, and you're halfway through, and then you continue writing and you get to the end, and you'll forget about that.
Yeah.
And so like that, like I've screwed that up before. So yeah, I've learned not to, you know, light the pilot light on that particular dumpster fire myself. Now, it's just in general, you're better off making an ally and helping other people out instead of alienating them. You know, a lot of people watch House, you know, MD, but like the way that he conducts himself probably doesn't even really work if you're a super genius, and it definitely doesn't work if you're not.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, because it's just, you know, like you pretty much have to have everybody dependent on you if you're going to be that much of a jerk, and odds are pretty good that they can still replace you anyway. So don't do that. Now, another thing, don't confront people about bad code early on in your tenure at an organization. You'll tick people off. Especially if you haven't proven your own skills, because that's the first thing that the incompetent people do is point the finger at other people. And so that puts you in the same camp with previous developers who they've already seen act out. And every organization, pretty much, if they've been around any length of time, they've already seen this behavior. So it's just a bad marker. You don't want to get in there. The other thing is this code may be messed up for a really good reason. And management is likely to be aware of it. Managers typically know what the sucky parts of their code base are. That's just the way it's always been. They just may not be able to fix it.
Yeah, I know back in, I was around December, November, December. It was the last time I was on the maintenance team. We have one department that they like to put at the beginning of the report that they send out to each company that works through them. They send out their trainings.
Okay.
And that changes year to year, the dates and stuff, and it's the same weekend of the month every year, but those specific dates change, so they have to change that, and it means going in, they have to put in a ticket, going in and having someone from the developers take out that PDF, put in the correct one, and then they can run their report. So there's several other places in there where they're filling things out for these reports that get put into the PDFs and generated. So I just brought it up to my manager. I'm like, hey, I know right now we probably don't have time for this, but wouldn't it be better for them to where if we made it to where they could just enter those dates and then it saves them temporarily and creates that for them? And her response was, yeah, that's a great idea. And if we weren't going to be replacing that application next year, we would totally do that.
Yeah. Like if you manage software projects at all, you realize a lot of stuff is around and you keep it running until you can kill it. Mm-hmm. And that's honestly, after an application's first release, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Even if you like the app, there's going to be a day when it goes away and something better replaces it. So you just keep it around until you kill it, and that may be what your manager is thinking. In fact, I would say it's pretty likely. Now, should you decide to try to help somebody and you've done this the right way, right? Like you've not alienated them or anything, but they refuse to fix the problem, and you've been there long enough that you have the social capital to do this. Mm-hmm. Should they do that? Let them eat the pain. And what I mean by that is when there's bugs, when there's changes, go, hey, look, they wrote this, they understand the whole thing, and let them go fix it. Because a lot of the reasons why people get away with really bad code for really long periods of time is because other people bail them out.
Mm-hmm. There's that.
It's like having it's like having a relative that's an alcoholic, and they would be living on the street if Granny wasn't paying their rent, but Granny pays their rent, and so they keep going to the liquor store. Like, I hate to put that in the same well, actually, I really don't hate to put that in the same category. No, it is kind of the same phenomenon.
It's a similar type of behavior.
Yeah, it's enabling behavior. So, don't participate in that. Honestly, natural consequences are a better fix for stupid actions than any kind of retaliation out there. Just let them eat the mess that they have created for everybody else. Now, if you are forced to fix it because you don't have the capital to get away from that, casually refactor the code as you fix things. Then explain to the other person what you did to keep them in the loop. Now, this does several things. One, it gets rid of the problem, right? Because either they have to jump in and fix code that is working, mm-hmm. and look like an idiot, or look like they're being protective of the code, so it puts them in a bad spot there, or they have to go along with it, in which case, okay, better practices are coming in.
Yeah.
Either way, and it's fixed under the radar. So that's probably the way that I would approach that. Now, sometimes you'll end up in a situation where management comes down on you and goes, no, you just fix this problem, you don't fix the larger code. I would be real careful about staying at a place where that happens very often.
There may be reasons for it.
Right, there can be reasons, but like
where I work, when I brought it to management and said, hey, there's a better way of doing this, their response was, we're going to rewrite that application. So,
yeah, their response was the reason why, not don't do it, we don't have time.
Yeah.
And, when that's the default response, you need to think about that and decide whether you want to stay.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So our next question, excuse me. Our next question, which is the best and the simplest operating system for programming and website development? So at this point in the game, guys, the operating system, man, I'm just like all messed up.
No.
So at this point in the game, guys, the operating system that you use doesn't matter as much as it did just a few years ago, really.
Yeah.
We've got things like Java that were specifically designed to work across platform. And then with .NET Core, you can do .NET programming, which used to be only on Windows. on a Mac or Linux. And then, of course, you have web applications, which are going to run on a server. And you may not have control over the operating system of the server, or you may have to pick where you host them based on the operating system. So, speaking of operating systems, the point of them is to manage the hardware resources of the machine. An operating system provides the interface for your code to use these resources. It also handles things like task management or sharing resources, input, output, memory allocation. I'm sure Will could go on a very long list.
You probably will at some point.
Of all the things that an operating system does for you that your code just interacts with. There's several layers of abstraction here. I know, just for example, with .NET, you have, so you get like your machine level code, and then you've got your assembler, and then you've got another level, and then the CLR.
Yeah, you got like you got like the unmanaged stack that's sitting between .NET and the OS, and then you've got the OS code itself. And the OS is bootstrapped on top of, it's got its own lower levels as well. So I would probably pick the OS that I think I can work with the best. Bear in mind that, like, if you're good at Linux, like, don't do Windows, right? Like, you don't want to get hit with updates when you're trying to work.
Not that hasn't happened tonight.
In the last 28 minutes. Had to go look at the timer. Sorry.
We had that happen to us tonight.
So, like, if you're a Linux person or BSD or Mac, like, you're probably not going to jump on Windows.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a Windows person, you probably don't want to drop to the command line to diddle with your video card every 48.7 minutes, like I've had to do on Linux.
It just cracks me up how
thank
much
you,
work
NVIDIA.
Because of your setup.
Yeah, with like two NVIDIA cards, it was awful. And I'm going to switch to a single video card and a big display and try that again and see what happens. But you do have to consider, okay, what's my goal? Is my goal to tinker with an OS, which is a perfectly legitimate goal and loads of fun if that's what you're trying to do? Or is my goal to write code and run it and ship it? It's like the difference between going, okay, I'm driving to Florida, or I want to repair an old car.
So the idea behind this question was, when you're starting out, what's the best and the simplest thing to use? And what we're getting at here, guys, is that the simplest thing to use is what you're most the simplest thing to use is what you're most familiar with. So if you've been using an Apple or Mac for the past 5-10 years, stick with it. If you grew up using a PC with Windows and you've been with Windows since 95 and 3.1, older than that.
DOS 6.22.
Yeah. So if you've been with it for that long, then starting out, that's where to go. I when I first started learning to program, I wanted to get into Linux because I thought it was awesome, and it reminded me of a lot of the things that I used to mess around with when I was younger. But that's not what I was trying to learn. I was trying to learn to program, specifically in .NET, because that's where the jobs were. So I stuck with Windows until my crap top wouldn't work anymore, and I dual booted. That's a whole nother story, though. So, but yeah, stick with what you know best. That's going to be the easiest thing for you to program in, unless you are writing really specific, like operating system specific code.
Yeah, real low level, or like we've got a lot of performance stuff. Like, you'll know if you're into that. Now, I will say this: if you don't have a whole lot of experience in any OS, and for some reason you decided, hey, I'm, Jebediah, I'm coming in and out of the field, I'm going to stop being Amish, and I'm going to, pick a OS and start running with it, then pick Linux. And the reason I say that is because you can deal with like the big server iron. You get a lot of other skills that are going to get hidden on Mac and Windows, right? Like if you're
Yeah, but it's not the simplest for learning programming.
no, it's not. But like if you're making that gigantic leap, you're probably capable of jumping a little higher. So you might as well just go for it.
The question is, what's the easiest and simplest? So I was going to say the exact opposite. I would not suggest going with Linux if you have no familiarity with anything.
Well, let's debate this a little bit. I think part of the reason that you and I find Windows as straightforward as we do is because that's what we started with. And I wonder, like if somebody jumps in and starts with Linux, like, I mean, crap, I started with DOS 6.22, right? Like I started with a console.
Yeah.
A really crappy console, but I started with a console, and
you make a good point. I'm just saying the question is the simplest, and
yeah,
it's not going to be the simplest if you're building websites. You don't need to be worrying about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I will also say too, for folks that are outside the U.S. In impoverished situations, Mac OS and Windows do cost money. And sometimes that can also be a differentiator, right? Like the system can be, like a Mac is going to be easier than Windows. I don't own a Mac.
I do, but the Mac I own is
is a phone.
Is a phone.
Yeah.
Go Preds. It's a phone. Actually, I do have a Mac that it's I think the original MacBook that my sister got when she was a teenager and gave to me a few years ago because I was wanting to write some iOS apps and you have to have a Mac to...
Yeah, because they do the whole walled garden thing. Yep. I will also put that in the list, right? Mac is very much a walled garden. Mm-hmm. Windows is not a walled garden, but it's like it's got like a little bit of a moat maybe around some of the things. Whereas Linux is basically...
an open field?
Yeah, just start chipping away at stone tools and making fire.
Yeah. So, some people, though, of all this back and forth, some people prefer the hardware of one system over another.
You sounded like a childhood preacher of mine. Some people do this thing.
My voice is not that lispy.
No, it's not that lispy. But like you just brought back memories.
No, what I'm getting at, some people they prefer the hardware of one system over another. I know a lot of Windows developers that use Apple's and they run Windows on it.
Yeah, they run a VM or they run it direct, right? You can put that on the hardware.
Yeah, and they prefer that. I have several coworkers that use Macs. And it's not just our front-end developers. Some of our back-end developers use Macs and run Windows VM. I may become one of them because the Apples are better.
Yeah, you probably get more screen real estate and lots of other stuff. The other thing too is with a VM, like I can make a backup, right, of that VM, and when Windows Update screws up drivers, which it's known to do, I can just restore.
Yep.
And recover instead of just getting burned and having to spend time. So I think part of the issue here is that the word easy is a very tricky word because there's more than one dimension to that.
Very true. Very, very true.
Okay, so another question. My coworker refuses to use source control and is working in a very old code base from back before we regularly used it. That would be like late 90s, early 2000s for a lot of shops. Some other shops, 2010, 2018. No. There's one or two of them out there. You know who you are. So management doesn't seem willing to push him to start using source control because they're afraid he will quit, leaving them with a complete inability to fix any bugs since they don't know where the most recent copy of the code is. So I'm going to start out by saying OMG, WTF, BBQ.
Barbecue?
Yeah,
Why not?
Just start stringing the acronyms together. This is, okay, the tolerance of this is pants on head stupid. Let's get that out of the way. This is not okay. This breaks change control. This breaks disaster recovery. This breaks collaboration with other developers. This breaks anything you wanted to do since we had this little thing called the network.
Yeah.
what happens when this person leaves? And I don't mean if, I mean when. Okay, yes, they may stick around for years more, and they may leave through that door their last day feet first. However, they are going to someday not be in the building.
Yeah.
What happens then?
And, a lot of times this is not a matter of they're the only ones that know the technology, or that other people can't learn the code or the language that was written in. It's a matter of they're around because they're the only ones that know where it's stored.
They're the only nuns that know where it's stored.
Yes.
Yeah, just don't get into the habit. Yeah. Okay, so this is a way of protecting one's own turf, right? Like, this is something you'll see really incompetent developers do on a fairly regular basis is, hey, they can't fire me if they don't know where my code is because then they're toast.
The thing is, I would not think it was incompetence so much as the way things had been done for so long.
It could be
it would be, like, I guess that would be incompetence too, but it would be more of not a I'm going to protect my job by this, but a matter of, well, this is just the way that, we've always done it.
I've seen it both ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is really bad. I mean, like, what happens if somebody else has to work with that code? What if two people have to work on it at the same time? Like, it's a big enough code base that, like, you and I are working on it.
Yeah.
And, okay, we don't have source control, so we get to do a baseless merge when we're done? What?
Yep.
Right? Like, this is not okay. This is really, I cannot express how, again, pants on head stupid this is. I got nothing on that.
It's interesting that you picked this question because I've been doing some work with web forms recently.
Yeah.
And this is something that isn't compiled. So
yeah, the front page of itself, like the back end is compiled, but there's this chunk that's sitting out here that's like, oh, this is a template. Except it's actually got logic in it.
Yeah, it's like the code behind where it's like a HTML with, instead of JavaScript, you've got like VB or C# or something like that.
That's what I work with all day, every day, by the way. Still.
And so I've been dealing with that, and I've been told a couple of times, well, it's just faster to take that page you're working on and just copy that over into the environment. And after having to publish,
yeah, it is faster.
It is a lot faster.
And
I get why, if you're only making it one little change in one little spot, why that would be. But that's what you made me think of when you were talking about this.
It's totally faster to get a cup of water out of the toilet instead of the fridge. However, the hygiene aspects overweigh that. That's
not if you're a dog.
Not if you're a dog. Well, I mean, if the dog is using the cup at the fridge, like, put that dog to work. Wow. Okay, so, like, do you really want your builds and deployments to work like it's 1995? I mean, 1995 was a cool year. I remember it. Started driving then. Well, except for the tractor. That was in the 80s. But, again, I don't want that to be the peak of the technology because everybody else is. Like if you got competitors, and even if you're a state government, right, there's somebody else that can come in to to your department and outcompete you potentially, or an external vendor. Like, there's always competitors.
Yeah,
you are going to get curb stomped by your competition doing that. I mean, this just has manual deployment written all over it. This is horrible. The other thing is, this is an indication that management is not in control of their team. If this person worked for me, they'd use source control, or they'd use source control, or I would do my darndest to fire them, straight up. This is this is not acceptable behavior. This is screwing over the rest of the team. Somebody pushes back against reasonable practices, like source control, like actually testing your code, having backups, those kind of things. That's the point where you just go, okay, they're essentially saying, screw the team. I'm going to save a couple minutes here and there, even if it takes everybody else weeks. Mm-hmm. That is the creator of toxic environments. That's something that is to be avoided. It is to be smacked down as soon as it happens, and you don't put up with that crap. I just like this kind of question really infuriates me. I'm sorry.
It's funny we pick our own question, so he picked this question.
Yeah, I did, and I'm
slew
unfortunately going on a rant about it. But like, if management is scared of somebody that is this dysfunctional, they're not going to get good results from their team. And that's just the end of the day, because when you create an environment where the most dysfunctional person controls it, what is a characteristic of power in that environment? Being dysfunctional. The more messed up you are, the more power you have. That's not something you show to people. That's real bad. Okay, so let's play Mr. Nice Guy, play good cop.
Yeah.
On this. This is also bad for that coworker. Okay, at some point they are leaving. They quit. They get fired. They decide that, I really like Jersey Shore and I'm going to move there and then become a developer because, hey, they're the sort of person that doesn't use source control. Maybe that seems like a good idea to them. But they do this. They go somewhere else. They can't get a job because they are against industry best practices. And like old school, like well-known, this is how you do things, industry best practices. It's really, really bad for them. And if they get hired by some unbelievable, miracle delivered by Moses on a mountain, they're going to get canned in about 6 months when they destroy something major that the team can't recover from.
Yeah.
It's just dumb. That's the end of my rant. I'm sorry.
All right. So moving along to our next question. This is a completely different subject.
Yeah.
Why do some people cover their laptop cameras with tape? Is it just paranoia? So I ask, is it paranoia if they're really out to get you? And you know that song, Paranoia, Paranoia, Everybody's Coming to Get Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sort of yes and sort of no. Why anyone would want to watch me through my laptop's webcam, I have no idea.
Hey, maybe somebody needs help with their diet. And they just want to see something that makes them not want to eat. I don't know. Hey, I was answering that for me,
comments.
too. Yeah, the off-screen comment, it was a single-digit comment. It was a 4 in binary if you're counting on your fingers.
So the thing is, there is some precedent for this fear. There have been several stories in the news, even some recently, about hacked webcams. Sometimes the hackers will ask for ransom because they've taken images of people that they don't want shown on public media.
Right.
Or sometimes they just like the feeling of control over people, and they do it for the thrill. There's some really messed up people out there, guys. Especially in someone that's going to...
internet?
Yeah.
Just in general.
Though I will say, covering your webcam does have some other effects. You can't use the camera to check the ambient light. I know, like, my phone does this, and I can set my computer up to do it if I wanted. But because of this, you can't adjust brightness based on...
Wait, what? You can do that on Windows?
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to show me how to do that afterward. I didn't know you could do that. That's cool. I always unplug mine on my desktop. Like, if I'm using it, it's plugged in, and if I'm not using it, it's unplugged. It's not just covered because it's got a microphone with it. So I'm like, I'm not exactly the sort of person you put on a hot mic. Not that we know this.
Never know. Also, it adds an extra step if you, say, are recording or broadcasting a live feed.
Right.
So if you do want to cover your laptop in style, you guys could come to Music City Tech and get one of our really awesome complete developer laptop.
Is that upside down?
No. Oh, it is upside down. I didn't look at it before I set it up here. Check it out, guys. These are really awesome. And they work really well because look what happens when I do this. Hey, where did we go? There we are.
Yeah. Works like a champ.
Yeah, so they do a good job. But these things are really good. They look nice. I I just thought that was an interesting question when it came across it, and I was like, yeah, that's legit.
I think the main thing about computer security at this point in the timeline is that nobody's paranoid enough.
I agree completely.
Like, I mean, just the amount of stuff that goes on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it does, and you know, the thing about this is this video is going to be available for quite some time online, and it really doesn't matter when you watch it because that will still be true.
Yep.
Okay, so another question. Is it just me, or are there too many programmers in the world? Why does the news always say there is a deficit of programmers? Okay, so it's not so much that there's a deficit, but there's a deficit of them in the right places. That's what a lot of people are talking about. So you got, you know, expensive cities, especially. A lot of companies insist that you work on site. Well, if you're in, you know, Silicon Valley somewhere where the median new home price is like $1 million, you know, you're coming in as a junior developer or mid-level or probably even a senior developer, you're going to have a real hard time paying for that house. And as a result, you're either going to live in a dinky little apartment and have a low quality of life, especially if you've got a family, or you're not going to live there. And so a lot of that is urban environments that are a little too expensive, and they can't get people, and they won't outsource. You know, even just like a county over, they won't outsource and go, okay, you can work from home, which is absolutely ridiculous. And eventually the economic forces are going to change that, I suspect. But right now, that's a lot of what they're talking about. There's also a reluctance on some companies' parts to pay market rates for developers. Yes, we are expensive. It's an expensive skill set. It's something that you have to constantly maintain.
Yeah,
you not study after hours a lot to stay where we are.
There's a lot to it. It's not just you come in and you do your job, but
right.
You know, there's a lot to get to the point where you can get a job. There's a lot to moving up within the job, and then there's a lot to maintaining.
Yeah, and not falling backward. The Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland, that's real. It's called a development job. You run as fast as you can to stay where you are.
Yep.
So that's another thing that goes on there. That's also why the companies are kicking and screaming a lot and going, oh, we need to bring more people in, because the wages, like the pay rate does hurt them, right? And they want that to be lower. Like they're incentivized to do that. Like it's not a moral judgment on them. They want the rate to be as low as possible, and we want it to be as high as possible. And those two things are, you know, they're at odds.
Yeah.
It's just math. Now, there's also a deficit of skill. It's still really hard to find good developers. You know, people that can actually understand your business processes, people that understand how the computer works to a degree that they can really do something with it, not just little hacky crap and gluing stuff together, but like real hard code. Those kind of people aren't easy to find. I've got several friends that are trying to fill several positions, you know, different places they work, and they are not having any luck right now, especially and this is Nashville.
Yeah.
Like this is not, you know, we're not that hot of a city for this.
There's a lot of turnover too. You have a lot of, and this is the thing, the second part of this question is, why does the news, the first part I said too many programmers, I should say, there's a lot of junior developers.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people leaving this industry. Most people don't stay in it more than about 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. And that's why I'm one of the old farts, right? I've got a little bit of gray hair, but not that much. The first code I got paid for was 20 years ago this November.
Yeah.
Actually. You know, like I'm one of the old guys, and the reason is because the dropout rate is really high. There's also high turnover at companies as well. So people leave. And the main reason people leave is so they can get a higher salary. Like your salary does not go up for staying somewhere for the most part across this industry.
No.
And so everybody's leaving, and they've got to get replacements. And they're scared to death of what happens if, okay, not just the people that left and we've got to replace them, but what happens if more people leave? They're scared. Scarcity mentality is part of what's driving this. So, and the final thing, well, I guess, you know, getting back to the whole scarcity mentality stuff, people don't completely understand what developers do. And so half the developers they do hire are not qualified.
Yeah.
And so there's a real problem out there with teams that are very inefficient, that are doing things, and it's taking an age to do stuff. And if you had 2 or 3 really competent developers, they could outdo that team of 10.
Yeah.
So that's also a consideration. So there's a lot of reasons for this, but yeah, there's your answer.
So guys, if you have questions for us, leave them in the comments. We go through those when we select the questions that we ask. A couple of shout outs here. Lucas, I think we've read some of your questions. My sister's on. Hey, Lori. Looks like a couple of other people on, but those are the ones that I see on here. So hey guys, if you're watching on Periscope or YouTube, we aren't able to see you, but hey guys, to y'all as well. So if you haven't already listened to it, check out our episode Solid Principles. The world of good grief. The world of object-oriented programming has lots of principles and patterns to help us build better code. At the core of these are ones that define or elaborate on what Uncle Bob Martin, in his mini writings on object-oriented programming, has talked about. They can and should be applied to any object-oriented design and serve sort of as the core of certain methodologies built around object-oriented programming, such as Agile. SOLID is a mnemonic acronym for 5 core principles to designing and implementing solid object-oriented code. See what I did there?
Oh, yeah, that's clever.
Yeah. Single responsibility principle, open-close principle, Liskov substitution principle, interface segregation principle, and dependency inversion principle. Now, we're going to go through each of the 5 principles, breaking them down and discussing how they're applied and provide some insights and background as we go along in the episode. If you haven't already listened to it, check it out.
So our episode coming up this week is how to survive a job loss. Whether through an acquisition or being downsized or even just being straight up fired, no job is permanent, and we're all eventually going to face sudden changes of employment. That's baked into the cake. That's something that's going to happen. When it does, many developers are very poorly prepared. And being unprepared can have a really negative impact on your finances. It can require taking on a job that you hate just to survive. It can also ruin plans for vacation and holidays. It can, create a tremendous emotional toll. It can damage your relationships. It's just a lot of bad stuff can happen, especially when you're unprepared. Recovery from an unexpected job loss can take a lot of time and effort, and that emotional toll also adds up even after the fact, right? Like, it's not just the loss, it's the pile up that happens afterward. In general, a job loss is not going to be pleasant. We're not going to tell you how to make it pleasant, because honestly, if it is pleasant, why are you still at that job?
Yes.
But there's a lot of stuff you can do to at least mitigate the damage and make it suck less, and maybe even make it advantageous when it does happen. Or basically increase the surface area of your luck. We start off by talking about what to do before you take a job to prepare for its eventual loss. You go in, you understand that here's the beginning, there is an end. What does that look like? Next, we talk about what to do while you're on the job, both before and after you know that you'll be leaving. So this is one of those deals like if you know a layoff is coming, you're told, okay, you're getting canned in 3 months. How do you handle that versus, okay, you're getting cut off today? Next, we talk about what to do the first week after your job ends to mitigate the negative effects. There's a lot of like hygiene type stuff and just keeping your headspace clean and being effective so that you can get back in the workforce quickly. And we want to go over that. And the big thing here is that a job loss can be really hard to take. But a lot of the preparation that we are suggesting in this episode will make a job loss less likely, and it will make it easier to weather when it happens. These things all work together to make you a more valuable employee as well. So if you're prepared for the job loss to occur, those things that make that survivable also make it really a bad idea to fire you. So we encourage you to listen to this. It's very valuable. I know several people actually right now that need that. That was not, we were not intending for that to be needed when this episode was recorded. The timing just, that's the way it worked out. So I know some folks that are in between jobs right now that might be helped by this quite a bit.
All right, guys, so we're going to hop off here and get to recording this week's episode. We will catch you guys next week.